Hello, welcome to our latest edition of Moving Abroad. It's been a while. We're doing our first video recording and also podcast. Most of the, or all of the previous shows have been on a podcast. It's anchor.fm/moving abroad. You can see we have Portugal, Costa Rica, Panama. We have a lot of places you can find out about from expats in those destinations. But today for our video, I feel like I hit the jackpot because I have a gentleman here, Tim Leffel, who has written 3 books about traveling and about being abroad, moving abroad, that type of thing. We're going to talk about it and find out some good information about economical ways to live in other countries and different things like that. So without further ado, let's add Tim to the program. What's going on, Tim? How are you?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me on, Doug.
Sure. Hey, let's start with where you're from. Were you born in the United States?
Yeah, I was born in Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley and went to college in Virginia and then lived in Nashville, Tennessee and New York because I used to work in the music business. And then I went traveling and that was all she wrote.
What'd you do in the music business?
I worked in marketing trying to make bands famous. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, especially right out of college. It's one of those kinds of careers that you go into because it sounds fun and glamorous, and it was a lot of fun. But I went traveling and decided I liked that more and became a travel writer eventually.
Okay, so are you a nomad or do you have a permanent residence somewhere?
I actually have a permanent residence in Mexico, although I'm not there right now. I'm in a hotel in Baltimore, of all places. But I live most of the year in Mexico in a city called Guanajuato, and I own my house there, free and clear. So that's my base. Although before this pandemic, we moved around a fair bit, just, a couple months here, a couple months there. And I've still got family in Virginia and in Florida. So when I come back, I spend time in those places.
Okay, I'll be interested to see why you picked Mexico. But before we get into that, what is your motivation for doing this type of travel and writing these books and looking at moving out of the United States into other countries?
Yeah, well, I'll take the last one first because part of my motivation was moving out was cultural, just to live in a place instead of pass through. And I did that in my younger days. I taught English in Turkey and in Korea. And then once we had a daughter, when she was about 10, was when we made the move to Mexico. And we went back and forth a few times, but that was the real motivation there. And of course, the money savings. I mean, that's what my book's about. It's called A Better Life for Half the Price. And it's about how to live better without spending so much money as you do in England or the US or Canada. So that was part of it. Traveling, I just love being in new places with a new change of scenery, change of culture, different food and all of that. It just keeps life interesting, I think.
Yes. So how would you compare other sources for places to live to what you do? I mean, I've read a couple today, as a matter of fact, and they're usually different, So for example, the one I read today had Portugal #1. If you look at international living this year, they have them number 5 or 6, and Costa Rica's #1. What's the art in trying to figure out the best place to live overseas?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm trying to combine the economics of it too. So I wouldn't put Costa Rica anywhere near the top because it's the most expensive place in Central America. Belize is not far behind. But, if you're not concerned about the financial part of it, you can have a great life. I love Costa Rica. I've been there 5 times probably, but it's not where I would choose to live because I just think it's not a very good value. But, you know, those places, those publications all use different criteria. Sometimes they're crunching numbers, sometimes they're doing surveys. But all of that is a bit subjective because your #1 place might be my number 30, vice versa. But, I do think the places that are near the top all the time are great places to live. I mean, there's a reason lots of people have moved to Portugal in the past few years. It's got a lot going for it, and it is a good value, I think. And then, others just come up high because of proximity. I mean, Mexico is easy to get to, and so it's going to rank higher than maybe the bottom of Argentina, where it's an all-day affair to get there.
Yes. People, though, and a lot of people in the United States, are concerned about Mexico because the press makes a lot of it look bad and unsafe, even though it's a very large country. A lot of people don't realize that there are certain areas that are bad, just like here in the United States. How would you respond to that, the safety issue?
Well, I mean, we just had another mass shooting in the U.S. yesterday, a week after we had one in Atlanta. So I feel like in Mexico, I'm less apt to be a random victim of violence, because I think a lot of the violence in Mexico is what you get in the inner cities in the U.S. It's basically cartel against cartel, gang against gang kind of stuff. I mean, that doesn't mean people are in the wrong place at the wrong time sometimes, or they get caught in the crossfire. But for the most part, it's not something that affects your day-to-day life if you're an expat. There's less danger, I think, in terms of having somebody pull a gun on you just because there aren't as many guns around.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it is something to take seriously and be conscious of. I mean, you probably don't want to move to a place that's a known cartel headquarters city.
Mhm.
There's some places that used to be okay 20 years ago that are not, like Acapulco. I would not want to live there. But most of the places where there are already lots of foreigners, you're probably fine. Places like Puerto Vallarta, San Miguel de Allende, you know, Playa del Carmen. I mean, of course, things happen, but they're not any worse than your average U.S. location, I don't think.
So would you say it's easy if somebody moves there to pick up on where not to go if you're living there?
Yeah, I think so. And what not to do. I mean, like anywhere in the world, you're not wanting to be stumbling home at 3 a.m. drunk by yourself. That's not a good idea
Yeah.
in too many places. Maybe it's okay in Japan or Korea, but not many places. So, yeah, I mean, just the usual common sense stuff. And oddly enough, there's not much pickpocketing in Mexico. There is in Mexico City. If you get near the markets, especially, you got to, have your valuables zipped up and whatever. But it's not really a cultural thing there like it is in, say, Rome or, Milan or Barcelona, where it seems like half the tourists get pickpocketed at some point.
Mhm. Yeah, that is interesting. A lot of those places, that seems to be the thing, pickpocketing. You don't hear about it here. I know what happens here as well, but it
Yeah.
does seem to be a big warning for travelers. So who are the people, your target market then? So are you mostly writing about the most affordable places to live, or do you look at other factors that
Yeah,
are
and that shouldn't be the only factor, because I think those people tend to be bitter expats that have only moving for financial reasons, and they don't really have any interest in the culture or the people or the food, and they're just complaining the whole time. You see a fair bit of that in some of the cheapest spots like Cuenca, Ecuador. But yeah, I mean, I am trying to focus on places that are a great value and places that you can perhaps cut your expenses in half or more, in terms of housing, utilities, food, and that kind of thing. So my target market is twofold. It's retirees who are looking to get more for their money in their golden years. Maybe they don't have as much saved as they should have or wanted to, and some of them even are going to have to get by just on Social Security, and that can be a little scary in the U.S. Trying to live anywhere, even some rural location. But it's pretty easy in a lot of international locations, even in some beach spots. So that's part of it. And the other market is people that can work from anywhere they want, and digital nomad types, but also those who just want to pick up their laptop and go somewhere else. And maybe it's not all year. Maybe they're just going for 6 months, and then they're going back to their home in Canada when the weather's warmer. And
Mhm.
so there's a fair bit of that going on all the time too. But as you know, lots of people have become location independent in the past year who were not before. And so I think it's a growing market of those who can even have just a normal corporate job, but do it from somewhere with better weather and cheaper prices.
Mhm. So let's look at some different demographics, because it's hard to pinpoint exactly who the people are. Just like you just went through several groups of expats. Let's start. Let's say a lower income, Social Security maybe only. Somebody that's never had a lot of money that wants to move for financial reasons. What would be the top 2 or 3 places for that?
Well, Latin America is pretty easy if you're coming from the US or Canada, because you can stay on a reasonably similar time zone and the flights are pretty reasonable. So that's where a lot of people from North America end up. They just go south, so they head to somewhere like Mexico or Nicaragua or Guatemala in this closer areas, or down to Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina. Peru. And so those are kind of the best bargain places you could get by on 2 social security checks there pretty easily as a couple and live a reasonably good life, going out to eat, going out to cultural events, having your medical care taken care of, even if you're just paying out of pocket. So those are good choices. If you go over to Asia, there's kind of a cluster in Southeast Asia where it's Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia. Those are all a pretty good deal. Cambodia is the cheapest, but if you have any medical problems, you're probably better off in Malaysia or Thailand because they have much better hospitals. So that's, kind of depends on what your considerations are. I will say the visas are more difficult in those countries unless you're retired. If you're retired, it gets a lot easier because then if you can just sock some money in a bank, you can get a permanent visa basically and hang out as long as you want. But if you're younger, it's much tougher and you end up having to do a lot of border runs. And then the other clusters in Europe, it would be the Eastern European countries, what we used to consider the Iron Curtain countries, and also the Balkans area. So Albania, Montenegro, that area.
So those Colombia, I know, has been getting real popular for expats apparently, and that one's another one where you know, if you grew up at a certain time like I did, you just can't get Colombia out of your mind, with the
Yeah.
drug cartel situation. But
I've watched all the Narcos episodes. It's great.
Yes. So, so people, but it's become very popular, especially Medellin. It's been big now. What about the language barrier in those countries? I mean, all of those are not English speaking for the most part, the countries, and they don't really have as much of a focus as some others, say, Portugal, for example, or some other places, Germany, where people know English fairly well. So.
Yeah, and even in Asia, I learned some Thai before I went there the first time, and that was a total waste of time because anywhere that tourists are, they speak English.
Okay.
But that's not a given in Latin America because Spanish is such a common language that they don't learn English as quickly or as readily. So it does help to have some Spanish. In Brazil, you need Portuguese, but basically any other country in the Americas, it's going to be Spanish. And fortunately, there's lots of resources out there for learning Spanish. I mean, it's probably the easiest other language in terms of tools you've got at your disposal. And, there's TVs and movies and whatever. But having said that, there are a lot of gringo areas where you can get by pretty well in English. And maybe you just need, like a phrase book level of Spanish, we used to call it,
Mm-hmm.
learn to order food, take a taxi, that kind of thing. And you're probably set. So, I mentioned San Miguel de Allende in Mexico earlier. That's an hour and a half from where I live. And I could go there and speak English all day if I wanted and be okay. And obviously, if you go to some place like Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, those places are quite well versed in English because there's such a tourism infrastructure, and basically anybody who wants to work in tourism learns English. And so you can get by in a lot of places without it. But I do feel like you're culturally disadvantaged if you do that, though, because you really can't talk to anybody unless they speak your language and you don't know what's going on around you. You don't know what people are talking about. You can't read all the signs. And so you are at a little bit of a disadvantage. But having said that, if you move somewhere like the Czech Republic or Hungary, I mean, good luck learning those languages. And that's much tougher.
Yeah. So now, before we move to the next demographic, I want to ask you, because you brought it up about the language and the culture. Do you find yourself mostly hanging around with English speaking expats, or are you out and about with the?
Yeah, more than I would like to. And that's more a matter of just social ease more than anything, because, we're hanging out on the same message boards or Facebook boards. We know each other by sight because there's not many of them around, so it's only a few hundred where I live. So you end up knowing half of them. But also I'm just not in the right social circles. Like I know some people who play in the local symphony because I've met them through parties and whatever. I know a few people that run tour companies or, run a bar or something like that. But when I had a kid in school, it was easier because I would meet the other parents and I would, be with them on social occasions. But where I am, it is a little bit tougher to make friends with locals, and I need to work on it more. But this pandemic kind of put everything on hold in terms of socializing. So it's something I plan to work on more when I get back.
No question, it's changed a lot of things. Now, so let's go to the next demographic. Let's look at a middle class person that could live pretty comfortably in the United States if they wanted to, but have a little adventure in mind, and they want to get out and try something different. What would be some good places for them? Where would be some good places?
Yeah, so that's the important thing you brought up, because a lot of people can live in the U.S. fairly comfortably, but they'll just get a lot more for their money, or they'll get, a beach house, let's say. Like, you try to buy a beach house in the U.S., it can cost you $1 million and up. In Florida or California, anywhere, desirable. Whereas if you go to lots of locations in Latin America or Asia, you can get a really nice house on the beach, to rent or to buy. And so you can kind of, upgrade your life, or you can get a penthouse apartment in the city that's going to be really swanky. So yeah, you've got more options at your fingertips. Obviously, it's easier to go city to city. For instance, like if you lived in, I don't know, Chicago, let's say, or Toronto, and you wanted to just get better weather and move somewhere abroad, you could really upgrade your life in terms of what kind of apartment or house you get, but still have that, nice urban living lifestyle that you want with everything at your fingertips. Or, if you wanted to go to a place and own 20 acres, and be a gentleman farmer or whatever, you could do that for a whole lot less and be in a really desirable area. So I think it just opens up your options a lot more. If you wanted to move to a beach community in Florida and found that the prices were just way out of what you thought you could afford or wanted to afford, you can just sort of transplant that life to Central America instead and really live it up.
So give me some examples of some places, maybe.
So, there are beach locations all through Central America, but, we talked about Costa Rica and Belize before. Even in those places, you can upgrade your life and get more house for your money. But if you really wanted to do it up, then you could go somewhere like San Juan del Sur in Nicaragua, or you could go to the beaches of Colombia, Cartagena, or Santa Marta. There are some beach communities in Ecuador and Peru. They're just not full-time all year warmth like you have in the more Caribbean areas, because there's just weird Arctic currents coming up. So even though Ecuador's on the border, the ocean there gets pretty cold in the winter. So some people will just go back and forth. They'll have a mountain location part of the year and a beach location part of the year in a country like that. But then once you get to Southeast Asia, I mean, you've got loads and loads of options. I mean, there's hundreds of beaches you could live on there, and do it quite reasonably, whether it's a place like Koh Samui or Koh Phangan or the Krabi area in Thailand. And then there's lots of them in Vietnam and Malaysia that are quite nice as well. Penang is the big popular area in Malaysia for expats. And that's like a town, Georgetown. And then once you go out further, it's an island that has lots of beaches, and there's others just scattered all over the country.
Yeah, the Asian one's interesting to me because it's just so far away. It's a big commitment if you choose one of those places.
And it's hard to keep running a business or doing a job where you've got to be connected to clients back in the US or Canada. It's really hard to stay in touch. You got to basically turn your schedule on its head.
Mm-hmm. So are the people there welcoming to expats from the United States in the Asian countries?
Yeah, for the most part. And I think in all these countries you can get domestic help quite reasonably, and so a lot of people are attracted to that. You can have a housekeeper or gardener or a full-time nanny and that kind of thing. So that's another way to really upgrade your life. But I think they're mostly welcoming because, we bring a lot of jobs when we move to these places, and are generally free spending and good tippers. And so, they're generally happy to see us. I mean, not when we totally overrun a place, but I think that's more of an issue with over tourism than it is with expats. I mean, when places get flooded with expats, they're usually happy because it's still only a small percentage of the population, and they're able to get more for their house if they want to sell it, or they're able to, charge more in their restaurant, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I mean, that can build some resentment, of course, because prices go up for the locals. But, if you're just looking to, offload a house you've had in your family for 50 years and really cash in, you can do it. You can get more money from it from someone who's moving there from abroad.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And that has had an impact on some places where they've created these nice packages for people to move over there. Portugal, for example, the golden visa. Then they have all these real estate investors, and it drives up the market for the locals, which can create a whole different problem. But they're not the only example. There's several of those where the program is so nice that it's kind of become more of an investment thing than an expat deal.
Yeah, and obviously you reach a tipping point at some point where, like, how many is too many, and
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes a problem. I mean, I know in Lisbon it's becoming a problem with real estate prices, and probably Porto too, but maybe the Algarve. But then once you get beyond those places, there's just a smattering of expats in each town, so it's not such a big deal.
Right. Okay. So what about the next demographic? Let's go with the wealthy. They got plenty of money, but they want to go somewhere different, for an experience. What would be some good places for them?
Yeah, so there are places like Los Cabos in Mexico that are basically aimed at the wealthy in terms of real estate. They're aimed at wealthy Mexicans too, but also wealthy people from abroad. And as expensive as that place is, like, the prices make me choke when I go look at them. They're still dirt cheap compared to California. And so that's the comparison people are making. If you have Silicon Valley money and you're looking to relocate, you can get a sprawling mansion on the beach for what you could for just like a basic house in California. So that starts looking appealing. But then anywhere else you go is going to be less than that. So if you want a Miami kind of experience, you can go to Panama City and get, 3 times as much as you could in Miami in terms of space for the price, and really have that, gleaming penthouse with a pool and a big party deck and all of that. So that's part of it. And of course, wealthy people are looking to diversify their assets and maybe open a foreign bank account and a foreign trust. And also it's that, thing, some people want to have their flag planted in different countries in case all hell breaks loose, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe have a second passport as well. So there are places that cater to that, like Panama, like Belize. And so, those are alternatives to the Caribbean islands that are sort of known for that whole offshore game, but they offer a better real estate investment opportunity. And
Yeah.
there are some in Europe as well, of course. Part of the people, part of the demographic going to Portugal is not people trying to save money. It's people trying to, especially British, in light of Brexit, trying to, plant another flag and have a piece of property that they own somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. What about the Grand Caymans for rich people?
Yeah, I've got some friends that live there. They really like it. They're not that rich, but they do okay. But there's a lot of a lot of banker types there, investment hedge fund managers and like, if you have the money to buy your way into one of these places, then the world is your oyster. I mean, there's a lot of options out there, and there's getting to be more all the time, because I think countries are starting to realize that this is a desirable market to attract, and they're starting to compete with each other in terms of offering some kind of nomad visa or golden visa, like you were talking about. Come invest 350,000 in our country and you can get permanent residency. Well, I mean, if you've got that kind of money lying around, that's quite an attractive deal. I mean, it's not like you're wasting it. You're putting it into some kind of investment and you're hoping to grow it. So that can be an enticing possibility.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the advantages? You have citizenship, I assume, in Mexico, and another passport. There's a lot of talk on these magazines and things about how great it is to have a second passport and a second place. What are some of the advantages to that, if there are some?
Yeah, I don't have that. It's actually more difficult to get in Mexico than it is somewhere like Panama or Colombia. So I have not done that. I know a couple people that had Mexican heritage and they were able to do that more easily. But yeah, I mean, the advantage of that is to have just a second option. Like, a lot of countries will charge you more if you're from one country rather than another, or they give you a visa on demand, visa on arrival for some nationalities, but not for others. And, during this pandemic, an American passport was not a great one to have in a lot of places, because we just didn't handle the pandemic very well. Whereas if you had an Irish one, for example, it led into a lot more places. And, that was kind of temporary. I don't think it's going to last. Traditionally, a US one has been a very good one to have. But anytime you can sort of hedge your bets, it's probably a good idea.
Mm-hmm. What kind of advice would you give to people that are considering this And then follow up to that, what kind of advice would you give people that have made that decision and have entered into a new community?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to use this opportunity to plug my book since you
Perfect.
threw it out there. But I have a book called A Better Life for Half the Price, and it profiles 19 countries that are both a good value and relatively reasonably easy to get a visa, a residency visa. And then there's a few honorable mentions I threw in there too. But yeah, you mentioned international living, live and invest overseas. There's some other publications out there. Just approach them all with a grain of salt. I mean, even in my book, I tried to give the pros and cons of each area and be very honest about the downsides. I think those publications tend to skip over the downsides sometimes and present maybe a rosier picture than they should. They also have partnerships with real estate companies, so they're trying to talk you into buying a house, whether you should or not. I mean, I personally think you should live somewhere for a year before you buy anything, because it takes that long to get a sense of the market and a sense of which neighborhoods are good and which places are going to hold their value. So that's my advice for somebody who has already started to take off or made plans. Give it some time, rent for a while and get a feel for the place. And, you may end up deciding 6 months later that's not even the place you want to stay. So you want to have that flexibility to move on and not do House Hunters International is very valuable for seeing what kind of prices people are paying, and that part of it's very accurate. But I think the part where they somebody flies in, looks at 3 houses and buys something is not realistic. It's good TV, but it's not even how those people have done it when you look behind the scenes.
Yeah, they do recommend typically 6 months, but a year sounds good too. If you can get the visa or whatever you need to do that. I don't think everybody offers it for a full year without some type of big paperwork.
Yeah. I mean, it's most places you can stay 3 months pretty easily. Mexico, you can stay for 6, and there's a few countries in South America where you can pretty easily stay for 6. Um, the Schengen countries in Europe are difficult. Those are 3 months. So yeah, if you haven't started any kind of residency paperwork, then you're probably gonna have to leave and come back. There are some exceptions though, like Albania gives Americans a year. It's this obscure thing related to the Balkans conflict, the Bosnian War. Georgia gives everybody a year, just about, the country of Georgia, and that's becoming kind of an expat haven as well. It's over by Azerbaijan, east of Turkey, so it's a hike to get there, but it's good food, good wine, and mountains and ocean. So the Black Sea, anyway. So that's another attractive place to consider. So if you're worried about the residency paperwork, a place like that allows you to just kind of put that off for a while.
Mm-hmm. So what about people that have? I'm sure it can be overwhelming for some people going into a totally different country. They made this decision. What's some advice for them once they get there to acclimate and to have a better odds of staying?
Yeah, so this is a time when it definitely does make sense to make friends with expats and seek out, other people who speak your language, because they've all done this before. And so, you can meet people physically when you go somewhere, but you can also meet them ahead of time on Facebook boards, on old school message boards, and a lot of the advice is out there already. If you just go look for it, you're not the first person that's done this. You're not a pioneer striking off into the old west on a covered wagon. Everybody's done this before you. Hundreds or thousands of people have done this before you. So just go seek out that advice and read what they've written, what their experience has been like. You will see contradictions, especially when it comes to visas, because different consulates have different rules, and people have different experiences, but you can at least get the general idea of what you're up against and what it's going to be like finding a place to rent, what your ballpark of what you're going to pay. All that kind of thing is pretty easy to find.
You've got another book, The World's Cheapest Destinations.
So
That's a good source, I assume, as well, for these people looking to be expats.
yeah, and it's more geared to long-term travelers and digital nomads, but it gives you a good idea for which places are good bargains to live in too. And yeah, I would normally hold these up, but I'm traveling right now. But yeah, that's actually his 5th edition. That was the first book I wrote way back in 2002. So it's been through a few editions, and I revise it a bit each time. Sometimes a country will come out, sometimes another one will come in. And some places have actually gotten cheaper since then. And Mexico is one of them. It's actually cheaper there than when I first visited, 15 years ago, because the peso has declined, and that's happened in Colombia as well. So there's a few places that weren't such a bargain before, and now they are. So take advantage of it.
Well, then a place people could go would be your blog to keep up, because it is ever changing, the rules, the visa rules, the cost of living, those type of things. So what kind of things do you talk about on your blog?
Yeah, so both bargain travel and living abroad, and also a good bit on tactics. How can you find good travel bargains in terms of airfare and lodging, and playing the credit card game, and the loyalty points game. I encourage people to do that, because the sign up bonuses are so good that, like, why would you not? At least have one or two credit cards that are travel related, and put some regular expenses on there, and before you know it, you've got a couple free flights and some hotel rooms, and that can save you a lot of money when you're looking at your vacation.
Helps with luggage as well. You get free luggage on some of them,
Definitely.
which is something that I've always wondered about. I look at going overseas and some of these, visiting, popping around, and I see this Ryanair and some of these others. They're $30-$40, and I can, go from here to here. But I assume they nickel and dime you death on things like luggage and that type of thing.
Yeah, they work a lot better if you're traveling light, but they even nick you for a carry-on, so you're going to pay something no matter what. There's one in Mexico too called Viva Aerobus. That's the same thing. It's like you look at the fare and you go, "Wow, $29," and then it ends up being $129 by the time you're done.
Exactly.
But still, just for getting around, I mean, if you're willing to suck it up and pay, they can still be less than a regular ticket.
Mm-hmm. So some people that move, some of the expats want to continue to work. Some of them can because of the job that they have. Some of them are looking for work. But one of the more popular things is similar to what you're doing, travel writing. And I know you have a book about that as well. So what's some things in it that are good tips for people?
Yeah, that one's called Travel Writing 2.0. I would advise people, though, to just know up front that getting established as a travel writer is going to take you a few years. So don't think you're going to just take off tomorrow and next month you're going to start making a living at it, because even if you start your own site, it's going to take a lot of time just to get established in Google and, be seen in search. But then even, if you're writing for others as a freelancer, it also takes time just to, build up a reputation, build up some work and that kind of thing. So there are more lucrative ways to make money quickly. One of those is teaching English, which is something you can do almost anywhere in the world that it's not their first language. You're not going to make a ton of money doing that, but it's enough to make a living. But there's so many other remote jobs you can do now. Even, sales kind of jobs, customer service, marketing, so many things that didn't used to be remote are. But yeah, as far as physical location jobs, the old reliable ones were English teacher, dive instructor, real estate, salesman, anything like that, where you're dealing with other expats or people trying to learn your language. If you try to work as just like a carpenter or something, you're not going to make any money, because you're competing with the local workforce and they're willing to work for far less than you probably are.
Is it difficult, though, to go over there and work and make an income and deal with the taxes and everything here? I mean, in the United States and in Mexico or wherever you are.
Well, if you, there are tax advantages living abroad if you are doing it permanently. If you're just doing it 6 months here, 6 months there, you don't get any advantages. But if you actually live in a country for 330 days a year, you get this foreign income exclusion thing, where basically up to, I don't know what the figure is now, but like 85,000 of income, you're not paying U.S. taxes on that amount, because the theory is that you're paying taxes where you live, which you usually are, even if it's some kind of VAT, that's basically a sales tax. You are paying local taxes, so you're exempt from the U.S. ones. I have only claimed that now and then, because I'm going back to the U.S. sometimes for more than 30 days, and I'm also running a business that's based in the U.S. So it's a little bit more difficult for me. But if you are retiring or moving abroad, I shouldn't say retiring, because then you get into the whole, retirement, Social Security and all that. But if you are still paying taxes and you move abroad for a long period, there are advantages, but it's not as difficult as people think. I mean, You can still maintain your U.S. bank, your U.S. brokerage accounts, all of that stuff. I mean, I pull money out of my U.S. bank with an ATM. I don't even have a Mexican bank account. I mean, you can establish one if you want, and some residency visas will require you to, like in Thailand, but other countries, they don't care as long as you're spending money.
Yeah. Now, this tax thing you mentioned, though, that's on income that you would be making in another country. That 85,000 or whatever it was. If you move and you have a pension or Social Security, the United States is going to continue to tax you for forever.
That they will, Social Security or pension, yes, but yeah, I mean, people should get an accountant and look into it. And there are even accountant firms that specialize in this. There's one called Greenback Tax, or a few others that specialize in serving expats, so they know all the rules inside out. But generally, no matter where your money is coming from, if you're living in another country, then you still get that exemption. So even if all your money is being earned from, for me, for example, all of it comes from like Google and Amazon and ad networks, and things like that. And they're all based in the US or Europe, and it's fine. I can still qualify just because I am in theory paying taxes in a different country. So it's a way to keep you from getting double taxation.
Gotcha. But
You do
are
have to
there,
file, though. I want to point that out.
yeah,
It's very important. You always have to file if you're an American, no matter what.
no matter what. Yep. What are some though are there any real tax advantages? Just like I'm going to move over there. I've got Social Security and a pension and a 401k. I'm going to move to wherever, Panama, Ecuador. And are there going to be some kind of tax advantages? I'm still going to be paying the United States, but I just don't have to pay Panama and Ecuador unless I'm buying something. Or
Yeah, you will generally be exempt from local taxes. Some places like Ecuador and Panama, they have a lot of incentives. Basically, they'll exempt you from property tax. You can import $10,000 worth of goods without getting taxed, and so basically, you're just paying sales tax on what you buy. Sometimes they will give you a transaction-free real estate, no tax real estate deal. It's just different in every country, but any expat you're talking to, or any visa attorney or real estate attorney, they'll know all that and they'll be able to give you the details. But the big advantage is if you earn money abroad, in another country, including the US, you don't have to pay taxes up to a certain amount.
nice. So it may be an outdated term and it's hard to really totally understand, but there's third world countries like Panama we've talked about, but you look at photos of Panama City and it looks like a city in the United States, even it's bigger than some cities in the United States. When you travel to these places, do you think third world country, or is it most everybody has everything that you need nowadays that it's just not a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, there still is poverty in these countries, especially when you get out into rural areas. And it can be a little bleak in some of those villages, but I think the cities are, constantly coming along. And, I've got friends who live in Mexico City and they love it there. And they moved from New York a lot of times, or Chicago or somewhere, and they think they've got everything that they need at their fingertips, and they're living just a rich life as they were before. The one drawback is they can't drink the water, and so that's a little dicey. I mean, supposedly it's treated in Mexico City, but nobody really trusts it. So you have some things like that. You have to sacrifice. Maybe you have to throw your toilet paper into the trash can instead of the toilet. But you get used to all this stuff after a while, and the U.S. is the land of convenience, and you can get everything you want at any time you want, just about. And things aren't always as convenient in these countries, but you can still pretty much get what you need and have the kind of life you want. And yeah, maybe it's a little dirtier, maybe there's a little more graffiti sometimes, but most people consider it a fair trade-off.
Yeah. Are there other disadvantages you can think of for moving abroad?
Well, the big one for a lot of people is getting used to the fluidity of time. Things just don't happen as quickly. It's not like this anywhere. People aren't workaholics, and they don't understand that attitude. And so if you hire somebody to come do some work on your house, they're going to show up, but they might not show up exactly when they said they were going to, or sometimes even the day they said they were going to, but they'll get it done eventually. And meeting times are kind of fluid, and so you just have to get used to being more patient about things, because they look at that as a quality of life thing. Why be in such a hurry? And family is really important, more important than their job. And so if the two clash, they're going to choose the family option.
Yes, that's another good topic. The family, people in a lot of cases, these expats, they're leaving children, they're leaving parents. I mean, that's how hard is that to adjust to for those people? And is that one of the reasons probably that some people decide it's not for them?
Yeah, I mean, people get homesick and they miss their family. I do think it's a little easier to do this kind of thing like we are now than it used to be, and so you can keep seeing everybody's face much easier now if you want. And I do feel like a lot of expats have a better social life after they move than they did before, just because Americans are busy and it's a very car centric culture. You're not running into people on the streets like you are in a colonial Latin American city, for example. And there's not as many outdoor cafes where people are gathering, and so sometimes people end up having a much better social life and they're happy with it. But yeah, I mean, if you're really grounded in your community and you belong to church groups and civic organizations, then maybe you're going to miss home and it's not going to be as good, and you might not be as happy, or you just budget in lots of flights back.
Mhm. What was your main decision for picking Mexico for your place?
Yeah, for me, it was mostly proximity. And there are other places I would gladly live. We actually looked at Nicaragua and Argentina and some other places, but um, I still got a family in the U.S. So does my wife, and we wanted to be able to get back if we needed to. Especially, my dad was getting older and was in a assisted living place, and so I wanted to be able to go on a drop of a hat if I needed to. And you can get back and forth between Mexico and U.S. really easily, and flight prices are quite reasonable. And so that all played a part. The fact you could stay for 6 months on a tourist visa, we didn't even get residency the first time. So that was an advantage. But yeah, in these coming years, I'm going to just kind of use places as a base and go for 3 months here, 3 months there. But then I'll still keep returning to Mexico.
Okay, so you will have a permanent spot, not just be a nomad.
Yeah, I mean, I own my house and I do have residency there. So I will always have it as my base. But I do like to go experience other places for a while too.
Sure. Well, I got a couple more questions for you. One of them is, since you brought that up too, what are some of your favorite places that you've been to, just from a travel perspective?
I really love Peru a lot. I've probably been there 5 times and I'll go back again. And I love places with mountains. So I really like Nepal and northern India. I'm going to go to Patagonia next March. I've already got plans. And so roam around southern Chile and Argentina for a while. And so, yeah, I like those kind of places. I do like beaches, but I get kind of bored with it after a while. And I like hiking and biking and some more adventure kind of things. But yeah, I do love Europe too, and I want to spend more time there. I did like Portugal quite a bit. I've only been there once, and I want to get back. But yeah, I mean, any place that's culturally interesting, I tend to like to go back to. I'm not really a country counter. I I don't know how many countries I've been to, but I'm not trying to check them off a list. I
Sure.
want to have a good experience.
Well, I mean, obviously you've been to Peru more than once. What do you like doing there for five visits? What all kind
Well, there's a lot of variety. That's part of it. You've got the whole, Cusco Machu Picchu path that attracts most people there, but there's an Amazon jungle area and the river. There's Arequipa, which is a really nice city. I've been down to the Nazca lines, which are really cool, and there's a lot of wildlife there. And the Colca Canyon is just gorgeous. That's outside of Arequipa, and there's some great hiking around there. But I've done a few different treks in Peru, and I really like that experience of, taking 5 days to get somewhere through the mountains. That's a really special experience.
Very nice. All right, so the finale. Let's hear your list, maybe, of the top places for people to retire if they want to leave the United States. Some suggestions from you.
Yeah, so I think the easiest for Americans would be Mexico, Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador. They're already well set up for you and ready to welcome you, and the visa situation is pretty easy. If you are going to Europe, I would strongly suggest checking into Albania, because it's right across the water from Italy, and you get a year-long tourist visa to decide whether you like it or not. Otherwise, Portugal is still a good value. And then if you're ready to go all the way to Asia, then Malaysia is, I think, the best value out there. And they've got this thing called the My Second Home program, where you can get a residency there just by plunking down some money into a bank.
Very nice. All right. Well, this has been great. Very informative, very interesting. Let us know real quick before we head out, especially since this will be on a podcast as well, the websites to find all your good stuff.
Sure. Well, if you can remember my name, timleffel.com, that links out to everything, and it's got my books on there. It's kind of just my portfolio site. But the best place to see my regular rants are on the Cheapest Destinations blog. And then I run a narrative site with narrative travel stories from book authors, and that's called perceptivetravel.com. But you can always just Google my name and find all of this stuff.
Great. All right. For everybody else, if you want to hear some of the previous podcasts from me, from Moving Abroad, there's the address, anchor.fm/moving abroad. Tim, we appreciate it and have a good time over here in the United States.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And thanks for taking the time. And hopefully we'll talk down the line.
All right, great.